And we are live. Come on in the room. First live of 2021. 2021. We have officially graduated from 2020. Ha! So, yeah, I clearly need to get it together. But it is our first live of 2021. Come on in the room. I am looking forward to tonight's topic. Listen, getting online today was an interesting challenge for whatever reason, but we are officially here. So come on in the room. Hey, best friend. As you guys are coming in, do me a huge favor. Like and share this post. It's going to be our first episode of the year, and I'm kicking it off with a different tune, I guess. That's how I want to say it. We're kicking it off with a different tune, and I want to have a conversation that I believe is timely, a conversation that I think a lot of us need to lean into. We've done a lot for relationships' sake, but I want us to not be mindless in our interactions. I want us to have a thoughtful approach when it comes to relational dealings. Again, getting online was a doozy. Like my light went out. My camera didn't know if it wanted to work or not. My mom is coming in making noise. Welcome, mom. So come in. Let's have a chat. Y'all know how I like to do it. I couldn't greet y'all with a jazz tune because I was trying to get connected. I don't know what is going on with my computer, but it was giving me a bit of a hard time. So today, if you saw the topic, it is called Life After Breakup. And I want to have this conversation because I think that one of the things that prevents a lot of us from moving past what we hoped would last is the idea that we have to formulate an idea outside of what we didn't expect to end. And this can really translate in a multitude of avenues, if you will. Like it's not all specific to just relationships per se, but there's a lot that we need to consider when it is time to move on. And moving on is challenging, especially when it's not what we were hoping to have to do. And so the tagline that I put in this was it's been a good run, but all good things don't last forever. And that's probably a harsher statement to make, but it is true. And it is sometimes what we have to come to grips with, especially when that wasn't the expectation. So I wrote a note to self as I was drafting today's broadcast. And I said, listen, that particular timeline is something that my heart and mind have been in war over for months, because it's really hard when you were hoping that something was going to have longevity. It's really hard to watch it come to a close. And the heart wants what it wants, right? It's the heart wants to love and soothe and be loved. It wants acceptance. It wants to know that the investments and the deposits that it's made in those it's been in relationships with will outlast the test of time. And it's hard when you have to disconnect your heart from what your mind has fully come to terms with is no longer good for you. Um, and that's a challenge, right? Because that means I now have to formulate an identity outside of what I've been so invested in for so long. And I don't know that I'm ready to do that. Um, and it's tough. We've all been there in one way or another. And when I was talking to my husband about today's topic, he told me that this was probably going to end up being a two-part series because there's so much in it that I wanted to share. And I don't want to cheat the topic by rushing through it for the sake of saying that we got it done. I want to make sure that everything that we discuss is always thorough, it's integral, and that we hit the points that we need to hit so that we're no longer just just dialoguing to dialogue, but we're dialoguing for development so that we can become holistic in our approaches. Okay. So I want to start with segment one, which is going to be entitled Who We Became. Okay. So in every relationship, no matter its context, compromise is a must. I don't care if it's a business or a personal relationship. There is a level of compromise that is required if we're going to be in healthy dealings with other persons, right? And the thing that we have to sometimes toggle between is presenting our true selves in all scenarios while being flexible to be who or what that relationship requires. Now, that's a challenge sometimes because we would say, I'm enough. I'm enough in and of myself. I don't need to be anything other than me in order for this relationship to be fruitful. That's not always true because you can't handle everyone and every situation the same. There's a level of give and take that is required if the relationship is going to be long lasting. So you have to decide, am I willing to, one, be my true self, but also allow room for flexibility for me to be who they need me to be. If it's a relationship that is symbiotic, meaning there's a give and take, there's a mutual benefit for those involved in the relationship to grow in the relationship, right? Um, what I have found though is it becomes an unhealthy toggle when we don't set and adhere to relational boundaries. And so then we evolve into this version of self that we can't sustain long term, right? We're not being clear about who we are and how we show up in relationships and what we need while in those relationships. So we begin to overcompensate or we begin to evolve outside of our true selves for the greater good, or so we hoped, and it becomes a reality or a version of ourselves that we can't sustain. So we get relational fatigue because I feel at this point I'm giving so much of me, I'm evolving so much beyond who I am at my core that I'm not going to be able to keep up this facade long term. I'm at some point going to crumble under the weight of my facade. I'm at some point going to crumble under the weight of this reality that I probably don't even like, right? But I'm willing to do it for the sake of. That is where I would like for us to be a little bit more mindful because there should always be space for the real you in all relationships. There should be space for the truth of who you are to sit at the table. And at the point where you have to compromise identity because who I am is not what you choose to receive, then that is a relationship that you need to break ties with. My integrity and the core of me should never have to be compromised for me to be in a relationship of any kind. Okay, so I want us to be cognizant of that because there is a healthy balance of compromise, yes, but it should never be at the expense of who you are for anyone. Okay. And I have witnessed a lot of people do this in an unhealthy way, myself included. I'm not an innocent bystander here. I can only speak from what I know. And I promise you guys, when you log into this broadcast, it's always going to be a truth that I've been processed through, not what I read. Okay. But I would like to caution you with this, and I want to say this: never become who you cannot strengthen or support both mentally and physically. Never become who you cannot support and strengthen both mentally and physically. If and when you do, resentment will be on the backside of that because you have now evolved outside of the truth of who you are for the sake of something that potentially, sad to say it, has the likelihood of failure. And it has that because who you are isn't attached to it. It's who you pretend to be. Okay, so let's not do that. And I wrote something here that I have to blow up my screen just a hair to read because I want to make sure that the words are heard. I want them to be heard in the manner in which I heard it when I wrote it down. And I said this. as a follow up to not becoming who you cannot strengthen or support both mentally and physically. I want you to understand that that statement is not relegated to romantic relationships solely. That is a blanket statement that you should apply across all relationship types, be them personal, be them professional, be them friendships, be them associates, be them mentorships, be them business, be them churches, whatever. We have got to not become who we cannot support and strengthen, okay? Because so many people that I have witnessed, they have, at the expense of relationship, been almost lured into doing that in the name of the greater good, only to find themselves on the back end of those efforts empty, fully depleted, and understanding that who they were in those settings was relegated or hinged on their outputs, the benefit that other people were reaping from their outputs, not on the core of who they were. We've all been there at some point or another. And then we find that the people who have the decision making power then move on once our reservoirs have been depleted of what they desire of us. They go on to the next pool of candidates to almost conjure up their next victim, if you will. They have taken what they needed from us for their benefit and for the gain that they hope to ascribe to, depleted us, and then gone to their next pool of candidates to see now who can fill the void that you can no longer fill because you have nothing left to offer. Be mindful of that. Okay. And be mindful of what you allow, because I can't always say that it's somebody else's fault that we've been fully depleted, because there is a level that we were willing to give of ourselves for the sake of. So there is a dual level of accountability there. They got what they needed, but was there ever an ROI on that? Every relationship has an investment component to it. So when you go to the table to be in relationship with others as they are interviewing you to identify if you're a perfect candidate, you too should be interviewing them to determine if this is an environment that you want to engage in and at what level do you want to engage. Right? Because if we think about it from a business stance, when we are choosing where we're going to work or where we're going to volunteer, if you will, when it comes to a volunteer engagement, I get to decide if and when and how my time is utilized. When I subscribe to you as an employee, I am at the mercy of the business decision and the schedule requirements for that position. When I am in a friendship, I am at the mercy of what this relationship will require, the compromise, the time, the tears, the giving of oneself. I'm deciding that this is a contract that I'm willing to adhere to because of the benefit that we both get out of it. If there is no mutual benefit in relationship, but you still voluntarily choose to subscribe to it, then you are responsible for all that happens, good, bad, or indifferent, because you are a willing participant. Does that make sense? And so while we're thinking through this, I'm still on who we became, right? Because what did I say at the top of that? Every relationship requires a level of compromise. So we are choosing to become what this situationship requires. So when we make the conscious choice, then we also have to accept that it's going to be imperfect, that there are going to be tough days, that there are going to be great days. And when there is a severing of ties, I want us to be mindful to not only decide to reflect on how it all went wrong, because there was something about it that attracted us initially. There was something about it that made us feel like this was going to be worthwhile. And there were moments that we enjoyed, hence the reason we continue to engage. So don't throw it all in the trash because maybe it didn't go the way we hoped long term. Savor the moments of when it did go right because you want to be able to create more of those moments in what's to come. So if we only meditate on how it failed and why I'm hurt and I'm depleted with nothing left to give, then we're going to create more of that, right? Where the mind goes, the heart follows, right? And so what I set my intention on is what I'm going to create more of. So just because this didn't go well, let's not decide to ruminate. And when I say ruminate, let me explain if maybe that's not a term that you're familiar with, but it is truly deciding to meditate on the negative factors that happen in a situation, and you cause your brain to actually relive it in real time, and every emotion that is tied to that situation you actually relive it. And so we need to watch our meditations. We need to be mindful of how we allow those to create realities within our minds, because we begin to play those out in true reality, in the way we live, and the way we interact, and the way that we view people. So a bad breakup doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person or they were a bad person. It just means y'all weren't good for each other, right? You weren't good for each other. There was something that was off. There was an unequal yoke, if you will. There was something that maybe we compartmentalize this relationship, or we categorize this relationship incorrectly. Maybe we were better off as X, but we chose Y because we thought we were equipped enough to take the risk and go to the next level in that. So I want us to be cognizant of the voluntary choices that we are making while in relationships of all kinds. Okay? Because again, it is who we become that matters. And so giving of oneself, I'm going back to the point here about the voluntary rendering of oneself in a relationship. Again, I'm cautioning us um, to be mindful that giving of oneself should never lead to a false identity. Okay, and your value isn't solely predicated on what you give. There's also value in what you choose to hold on to. It's not always about what you're willing to give, but there's also something to be said about what you choose to hold on to. And I want to dig into that a little bit more because, again, if you walk with me a bit, you know that I am one who's always going to talk about boundaries and the importance of them. And not only to have them, but to enforce them. And so when we are giving, we have to give what we're not afraid to lose. I'm going to let that sink in. We have to give what we are unafraid to lose, right? And so if I'm going to give you my time, which I can never get back, I've got to be willing to lose the hours, the minutes, the days, the years, the weeks, the months. I've got to be willing to lose that at the expense of us because I believe we're worth it. So if I'm going to commit my time, I ask that you not waste it. If I'm going to commit and give my love, I ask that you value it. If I'm going to give my secrets, if I'm going to open myself to be felt and to feel in a secret or a sacred place with us in relationship, I ask that you treasure it. These are some of the things that you have to consider when we're becoming what the relationship requires. Give where you are unafraid to lose, and give without an expectation that it's going to be reciprocated in the manner in which you gave it. Because here is the other thing that I find is we give, right? And we're often well intended. And giving is great, but you have to understand there is a rationale behind your gift. Okay? You thought this through. You thought this was a great idea. You hope that they loved it and they appreciate it, but there is a why behind your gift that's unique to you. Okay? So when you are the recipient of gifts, be them whatever they are, you have to understand that that person has a why as well. And they're not always going to be identical. And so you have to be open to receiving what doesn't necessarily always match your why. But this is where relationships can grow, because this is where communication and understanding one's love language and how people need to be loved is important. How do you need to be loved? When you identify that, great. Understand that that might not be somebody else's story. They need to be loved differently. And so you cannot expect people to become who you are because they are in relationship with you. They are who they are, and you should give them the space to be. So in our becoming, let's be mindful of our expectations of who others should become for our sake. I hope that made sense. Okay. So, and that's the piece about what we hold on to. We should always hold on to our truths. We should always hold on to our values. We should always hold on to what we cannot live without. Because at the point where everything is a negotiable when it comes to you, that's a dangerous place to be. There are some non negotiables that have to be adhered to. There are some things that you value, and you valuing them helps you stay grounded. And you should never have to sacrifice that at the expense of a relationship. Okay. And I'm saying that because I want us to understand that value isn't found in your doing. I'm sorry, identity. Identity isn't found in your doing, it's founded upon your becoming. And I think that is probably one of the hardest things to grasp when you've locked in to doing, you've locked into the works, and you appreciate the accolades and the reward of the work so much so that it has become how you are identified. Let's think about it for a second. If you have dated someone, they typically refer to you as ex's mate. That's so and so's girlfriend. Oh, that's so and so's husband. Or that's so and so's best friend. That's so and so's such and such. Right? And so you start to be identified by your associations. Right? And that's good until you're no longer associated with them. And so now you're trying to formulate a new way to be identified. And in that in between of coming out of what was and the transitional period to becoming who you are now, you still might be called so and so such or associated with X because your doing is what you then allowed your identity to be formulated around. It's not in the works. Who you are and who you are purposed to be is already pre-scripted. When you wake up every day and decide that I am going to live fully in the truth of me, and I'm open to the possibility of learning another version of that person today because I don't know how the next 24 hours are going to go minute by minute. But thankfully, the one who penned every single moment is available to guide me, is actually excited for me asking or about me asking for assistance along the way. And I avail myself to the sound instruction of who I am to become today. Today, not what I do today, who I become today. I get to decide that. I get to decide to look at life through the lens of the possibility of the greatest me instead of who I will be to others based on what I do. I get to make that choice every day. Every day, we have a choice. Every day, we are gifted with an opportunity to grow in knowledge. Every day we wake up, we can become who the day requires of us if we are available to the author's voice concerning us. But it takes intentionality, it takes relinquishing our need to be in control of all of it. It is us deciding that I am submitted to something greater than me. And while I serve in the capacity of friend, of wife, of teacher, of husband, of preacher, of singer, of whoever I am, sister, brother, cousin, mother, whatever, and while I serve in those capacities, those are extensions of me. But who I am is what he calls me. And every day as I respond to the call of me, I can serve relationally and I can serve well because I'm responding to first the call of who I am. I'm choosing to grow in knowledge. I'm choosing to become. And as I become, I can be found doing, but I must become before I do. See, most of us just decide to do. If I take it romantically, some of us do as husband and wife, one to another, before we become spouses. And so people have an expectation to be treated at a certain level that they've yet not yet ascribed to because our doing looks like, sounds like, feels like this is who I am to you before I become it. Let's become before we do. Let's not put the cart before our horses in this season. But a lot of us are detoxing. A lot of us are clearing our heads. A lot of us are getting still. A lot of us are deciding top of year, I'm going to figure out how I show up well for the next 12 months. I want you to do that relationally as well because who you associate with in this season is so critical. It's so critical. And I know it is tough to let go of people, to let go of institutions, to let go of norms that we formed identities around. I get it. It's hard because now I have to grow in the knowledge of what now requires of me. And I liked what was. I know that. I'm familiar with that. I know how to navigate that with my eyes closed. But now I have to be open to the possibility of it having to be different than I hoped. And that's an attack on our faith sometimes because we had hoped so greatly in this. We thought if we just did the work required, it would last. We thought we'd be friends with them forever. We thought that our intentions were always top of mind for them. Yeah, it doesn't make them bad people and it doesn't make you naive. It just means that the season for that has concluded and there's life after that. I'm telling you what I know. I have walked into a church service this way long ago, so nobody got to call my husband and be like, "Did you hear what Jamila said?" He's fully aware. But I walked into a service, and the guy that I thought I was, I guess, casually dating or seriously dating, not sure, dating to some degree, had gotten married over the weekend, unbeknownst to me. But a lot of the people in the sanctuary knew about it, and so everybody's walking up to me, wondering, "Am I okay?" And I was like, what is the problem? Why is everybody being so weird? Until somebody had the guts to pull me to the side and they were like, hey, did you know that, so and so got married this weekend? Excuse me, what? So and so, I just talked to so and so, such and such and such. Yeah, they got married this weekend. And this is somebody that I thought I was going to grow in relationship with. I had good intentions. I gave of myself in a way that I thought that made sense. I was preparing for what I thought this was going to render. Whew, but I thank God today that was what I thought I wanted. Woo, thank you, Jesus, for blocking that because life after that. Ooh, God, I'm thankful. Do you understand me what I'm saying? God, I am thankful that you didn't give me what I thought I wanted. Oh, and I'm so glad to be the recipient of exactly what I needed and the life that I was actually called to. Thank you for not giving me what I desired in my ignorance. But in your sovereignty, you loved me enough to allow the embarrassment. You loved me enough to allow my heart to be shattered. You loved me enough for that to be on public display so that I would know without a shadow of a doubt that it was something that I needed to walk away from. Because, sometimes when we find out stuff behind closed doors, we figure, well, don't nobody else know, so we can just clean this up and then we can continue. I'm glad that it was on public display so that I didn't even have, it hurt my pride for me to go back I thank you that you love me enough to crush me in that so that I would know this is not for me. I have experienced it on multiple fronts, and I am telling you, there is life after breakup. There is life after the crushing. There is life after the embarrassment. There's more of you waiting on you. And yeah, it's tough when I hoped that this would have worked. Yeah, it's tough when I thought that they had my back for real. Yeah, it's tough when I have defended you to a fault and been mocked at the expense of doing so, only to find out that you really didn't have my best intentions when I walked out of the room. I get it. But I'm going to say this. Ooh, thank God for letting it happen when it did. Thank Him for letting it happen when it did, so that you wouldn't carry those things, those people, those unnecessary weights into what is happening now. Not what is about to happen, what is happening now. Because everything that begins, a birth, a seed, a growth, a sprout, happens beneath ground. And it doesn't look like much is going on until there is a sprout. But when a seed goes into the ground, its outer layer must die. It has to shed what it was identified before, or how it was identified when it went into the dirt. It sheds that. And so some of us, we've gone into the dirt and we tried to hold on to a shell that we actually needed to shed. And so if you find yourself fighting the shedding, I would admonish you to let it go. Let it go so the growth required of you can commence, so that you can actually experience the fruit of the burial. Wow. Thank you. Let it go so that you can experience the fruit of the burial. It's not all been for naught. You now have some insight on how to engage, how much of yourself to give, what people can be trusted with. You learn how to handle them based on these experiences. So it wasn't all bad. And you did laugh a bit, and you did walk through life for a spell. And that's great. And it's not to be discredited, but they have served their purpose. And now it's time for you to serve your now. It's time for you to decide that I will live beyond this, not merely floating through my existence, but I will evolve, I will grow, and I will show up fully present in every situation going forward, because I learned how to love properly. I learned how to serve properly. I learned what not to say. I learned what to say. I learned when to listen. I learned when to speak. I learned when to be poured into, and I learned when to pour. These are the things that we learn through experience. So, what failed didn't make you a failure. We only become, how do I want to say that? We only fail to reap the benefit of the experiences when we fail to apply the lessons they gave us. And so there's life beyond this. There's so much more to be experienced. So what I want us to be cognizant of is becoming creatures of habit and allowing past circumstances to shape our dealings. I want us to uproot the bitterness. I want us to uproot the anger. I want us to uproot the rage, because I don't want us to be identified by the poor pieces. I want us to be identified by the knowledge and the grace that we're growing in daily. I want us to show up with a smile on our face. I want us to show up and fill the room with personality. I want us to show up to our jobs with our hands blessed, anointed to bring the next witty idea to fruition. I want us, the next platform that you mount, if that's what you do, I want you to speak from a level of conviction that has been purged of bitterness. I want us to speak truths that we have been afforded the opportunity to be processed through. I want us to love people for who they are and not who we hoped that they would have become. I want us to give people the space to be without making them feel like they're only as good as their works. Give people the grace that you need. And if you know they're a good person, just bad for you, be brave enough to walk away so that you can be the greatest version of you to the people, the tribes, the nations that need you, that deserve you. More importantly, be that person for yourself. There's so much more that I want to talk about, but I am cognizant of time. And I'm a little over and past 8 o'clock. But this is the kind of dialogue that you can expect from me this year. This is the manner in which I choose to serve going forward. Unashamedly, Jamila, being okay with not having to be perfect and being okay with the flawed journey that I one have walked through, and being okay with telling you guys that perfection is a lie, but authenticity is a choice. And you can be that in every relationship going forward when you first decide to be it for yourself. Be it for yourself and then become it for others. This is our year to reap the fruit of our burials. Let that sink in. For your journal prompt today, I really want you to really get serious and dig into the relationship that you are involved with, are involved in. Every type of relationship. Leave none excluded from this journal prompt. And really do some auditing and some assessments of all that you've poured into these relationships. Has there been a return on your investment? Is this something that you should knowingly continue to engage in? Does this environment deserve your presence? And if you come up with a yes, great, pursue. If you come up with a no, we've got to go through the process of severing the ties. And it's hard, especially when that wasn't the outcome that we wanted or hoped for. But I'm a living witness. There's life after breakup, be it personal, professional, whatever in between. There's life after it. And you deserve the opportunity to live it to its full extent. I love you guys so very much. I hope that you enjoyed the first installment of Thursday with Jamila for 2021. Again, these are the live talks that we are going to be having going forward. I am going to come back for part two. I'm going to see if I can get my husband to chime in for us, because we talked about the second part of this, and I really think that his insight will be something that you all would glean from and enjoy. So I'm gonna see if I can pull Hubs in next time. Join us not next week, but the week thereafter, for the second part of Life After Breakup. Love you guys. Have a good day. Bye.